Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. Now for today's video, we're going to be addressing some big news related to Peak Fintech Group. I've been receiving a ton of questions about this company. I'm personally invested in Peak, and they've had a really crazy couple of weeks here, which we're going to talk about in today's video. Now before we get into it, you guys, please take a second to smash the like button. It really helps get this content to other people like yourself who may find value and may have questions that are answered in this video. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, McNallie Money, feel free to do so. And let me know in the comment section below if you're currently holding shares of Peak Fintech, what you think about the recent news developments, and how you think this changes their growth trajectory moving forward. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, we're going to be providing an update on Peak Fintech Group. Now for those of you who've been following this company or you're invested in this stock, it's been a very wild ride over the last couple of weeks. You can see in today's session alone, the share price was down nearly 20%, 18.5%, which equates to about $1.78 on the Canadian Securities Exchange. In terms of the actual range of trading today, Peak opened at $9.40. It hit a low of 717, so a ton of volatility in this stock. So if we zoom out to a 1 month chart here, you guys, you can see that Peak was trading at $14 a share in the first week of September. So September 7th, it actually closed out at $14.02. And today, based on that intraday volatility that we saw, they have essentially cut their share price in half. So I wanted to get a video out talking about some of the recent developments, why all this volatility is going on with PKK. This is a company that I'm personally invested in, you guys. I definitely believe in the business model. I think they've got a lot of opportunity ahead of them. However, there definitely are some big headwinds that we're going to talk about in this video. Some of them are legitimate, some of them maybe not so much, and that's exactly what we're going to address in the next couple of minutes here. Now, before we get into the recent developments, I wanted to bring up the YouTube page and talk about a couple of things that we mentioned in previous videos. So you can see I've put out a couple videos on Peak recently here. One was a month ago, one was about 3 weeks ago. The share price was at $9.57 at that point in time. And in our second update video, the share price was at $10.66. So it definitely ran up a little bit from that point in time. And now we've seen that big pullback that we just discussed on the previous page. Now in these videos, you guys, we talked about some of the risks associated in investing with companies that operate in Asia, specifically China. So for those of you who aren't super familiar with Peak Fintech Group, definitely take a look at these videos, but essentially they're involved in the commercial lending space in China. Now, as this company has evolved, it's got into other areas or verticals, so they're getting involved with supply chain, shipping, delivery, stuff like that. But at its core, you guys, this is really a fintech company that's focused on commercial lending and making it easier for small and medium-sized companies in China to obtain financing, receive loans, and actually grow their business. So that's the core model of Peak Fintech Group. And one of the concerns that we addressed about this company's business model was their exposure to Asia, China specifically. And we've seen a lot of articles and news come out recently, not necessarily in regards to Peak, but just about the Chinese business environment in general and some of the roadblocks, red tape, hurdles that the government has put in place there that makes it very difficult for companies to operate and for investors to park their money in some of these type of companies. And that's exactly what this article here talks about. It came out on September 9th. And it's asking the question of whether or not China has now become uninvestable based on some of these bureaucratic challenges that the government has put in place. Now, this article is specifically talking about tech companies, of which Peak Fintech would obviously fall into that category. However, as you scroll down in this article, they're talking about some of the bigger companies operating in China. So some of the companies listed here, you guys, DD Global, Tencent, Alibaba was just in the news as well. And in those initial videos on Peak, we talked about the fact that this company is actually trying to help out small and medium-sized startups that can actually increase the overall level of competition and start to compete with some of these tech giants or tech conglomerates. And our conclusion at that point in time was that Peak wasn't on the government's radar. They weren't looking to crack down on this company, and they were really going after some of the bigger fish that were starting to threaten competition within their country. Now, despite the fact that Peak wasn't necessarily in the limelight, it is very concerning as an investor anytime you're starting to get large levels of government interference in the economy and with the business operations within specific companies. And that's exactly what we can see here, referring to China as a no-go zone for investing, and the fact that this new regulatory campaign has really spooked investors from companies that operate in this country. Now, in addition to this recent government crackdown on big tech in China, there's been a number of other articles that have come out throughout the year. This one comes to mind from March 17th that talks about some of the other challenges facing foreign businesses that operate in China. So they list out 8, and the big one that really stood out on this list for me as it relates to Peak Fintech Group was number 2, which talks about some of the regulatory hurdles. And that's a perfect segue into one of the first issues that's going on right now with Peak Fintech Group that we're going to talk about next up. So if you scroll down in the article here, you can see number 2, Chinese regulatory hurdles. The lengthy administrative procedures, especially with respect to permits, registration, and licensing, have remained a constant challenge in China. And they go on to fill out this point in a little bit more detail, stating the fact that despite the Chinese government has made significant efforts to streamline the level of bureaucracy and red tape, foreign companies operating in this country continue to complain about bureaucratic barriers that hinder their plans to expand within the country. In addition, a lack of transparency in the regulatory process, inconsistent and unfair interpretation of regulation makes it further difficult for foreign businesses to compete in the Chinese economy. And it's ironic that Peak Fintech Group was actually trying to simplify and support businesses as they navigate some of these challenges, and now they're really becoming a victim of some of this red tape themselves. And that brings us into this article here, which came out September 21st. So I should note, you guys, this doesn't necessarily have to do with red tape related to the Chinese government, but it does have to do with the company's overall review process, filing, and forms related to them trading on the Nasdaq market. So you can see here the title reads, Peak Fintech Group provides an update on the status of effectiveness of its Form 40F. So this Form 40F, you guys, is required by the Securities Exchange for companies to trade on the United States Nasdaq market. So this article came out on September 21st. This really started to spook investors, or started to get the ball rolling here in terms of the share price decline, because investors were immediately questioning, okay, why are they reviewing this registration statement? What is this going to mean for their Nasdaq listing? Peak Fintech Group was trading under the ticker symbol TNT on the Nasdaq market, and obviously trading on this big US exchange gave them additional access to capital and investment eyes, and if that was in jeopardy, it could definitely be viewed as a bearish situation for Peak Fintech. And lo and behold, Tuesday, September 28th, we got an update on the 40F form, you guys. Peak Fintech Group actually withdrew its application while it works to comply with the new SEC disclosure guidelines. So you can see here, Peak Fintech Group has today announced that it has voluntarily withdrawn its Form 40F, which is a registration statement filed with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC, while they work to comply with the recent disclosure guidance provided by the SEC for companies either based in China or with the majority of their operations in China. So it's worth noting that the only reason Peak Fintech actually has to fill out this registration statement is because of where their business is located and the fact that the majority of their operations and revenue are coming from China. And that's exactly why I brought up a couple of those articles talking about the challenges and hurdles for companies that operate in that jurisdiction, because this wouldn't have been an issue if Peak Fintech Group had their operations here in North America. Now in the next article, we're going to talk about some good news as it relates to their acquisition of their Cubular Business Hub, which really is going to allow them to start to expand into new markets. But as it stands right now, you guys, Peak Fintech Group is 100% focused on China, and that's really what caused some of these issues to arise. Now, where things get even worse for Peak Fintech Group, and why I think the share price has really fallen off a cliff here, is without one of these 40F forms, the SEC actually won't allow Peak to trade on the Nasdaq exchange. So immediately prior to the market open on Thursday, September 30th, the SEC actually said that Peak can no longer be listed on the Nasdaq capital market, and they actually removed that TNT listing until the company can fulfill or satisfy the need for this Form 40F. So this is really the first big issue for Peak that we're going to talk about in this video. Their uplist to Nasdaq was seen as a major bullish catalyst for this company. That was a big reason we saw the share price run up so dramatically over the last couple of months. That's something we talked about in our previous videos. And now the fact that they've actually got that stripped away from them, they're not allowed to trade on the Nasdaq, is really seen as a big blow to this company. Now, in addition to that piece of bad news, you guys, this article actually came out on Monday, October 4th, so very recently here, and it talks about an article that was published on the grizzlyreport.com. Now, if you're invested in Peak Fintech or you've looked at any of the forum boards or discussions about this company, this is another major red flag that people are discussing and another big reason we've seen the share price take such a hit over the last couple of weeks. Now, in this article, you guys, the team at Grizzly Research makes a number of statements about Peak Fintech misappropriating millions of dollars in funds. As you can see here, the report goes on to make several defamatory claims about the company and some of its executive team, which are nothing more than lies and fabrication. So the team at Peak Fintech has actually put out this statement saying that the article on Grizzly Reports was completely bogus. It's not factual, it's not true, and the company or Peak Fintech actually suspects that Grizzly Research is trying to use this article to actually push down the company's share price in order to cover their short position in Peak Fintech. And the team at Peak actually calls out the disclaimer, which is on the Grizzly Research website, saying this report and all statements contained herein are the opinions of Grizzly Research and are not statements of fact. So this, in my opinion, is the second big piece of information that's really pushed down the Peak share price. Now this is where it gets really dicey, you guys. For those of you who've been investing in the market for quite some time, you know that news travels quickly, especially bad news, and whether or not that news is grounded in facts or opinions oftentimes gets lost in translation. Now I can't personally speak to whether or not some of the statements in this article are true. And as an investor in Peak Fintech and in the leadership team, I truly want to believe that they're not. But regardless whether or not these statements that Grizzly Research has claimed are true or not, the damage is already done to Peak Fintech's reputation, and a lot of investors have really been spooked off and have aggressively started to sell their shares in Peak, which is what's causing that rapid share price decline that we talked about in the intro to this video. Now, Peak does go on to say in this article that they are exploring various legal avenues to ensure that Grizzly Research is held accountable for the harm that it has caused the company and the shareholders within Peak Fintech Group. So that's great to see as an investor in this company. But as mentioned, you guys, I feel like the damage is already done here. And by them publishing this article with these type of accusations, it's really had a very negative impact on Peak Fintech. So that's the second big problem going on with this company right now. And I think in combination here, you guys, some of the concerns about the Chinese regulatory environment, this Nasdaq delist, and now this article from Grizzly Research, I think it's really a perfect storm for Peak Fintech. Now that being said, I think this could represent a huge buying opportunity if you still believe in the leadership team and their statement refuting some of these accusations in this research report. And I personally fall into that camp. So I'm going to be looking to average down on my position in Peak Fintech. I think these are short-term headwinds that really don't have a material impact on the overall business operations. I think this is bad press, you guys, and I think it's just happened to push the share price down. I think ultimately they are going to refile that form. I think they're going to get back on the Nasdaq, and I do not believe that the management team has mismanaged all these millions of dollars. But again, that's my personal opinion, and I'm taking advantage of this share price pullback to really bring down my average cost and load up on additional shares of Peak at essentially half the price I could have just a month ago. Now, it's not all bad news for this company, so I did want to end off on a high note. This article came out October 1st, and it discusses the fact that Peak Fintech has now actually completed the acquisition of Cubular Incorporated. We talked about this in some of our previous videos as well, you guys. This Cubular platform is really what powers their business hub ecosystem. Again, for more details on that, take a look at some of those previous videos we've put out. But essentially what this does is it now enables Peak Fintech to offer their business hub concept to various different countries around the world. So not just within the Chinese borders. And they're actually planning to expand here in Canada later this year. So this is super exciting because number one, it opens up a huge addressable market for small, medium-sized companies across the planet. And number two, it really diversifies some of that risk that we're seeing within Peak Fintech because it is currently focused 100% or exclusively on China at this point in time. Now, I think this article has really kind of been buried in some of the other bad press that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. But for me as an investor, this is a massive game-changing announcement for the company. And again, I think as time goes on, some of this short-term bad press is going to blow over. But this acquisition here is really going to fundamentally change the company's growth trajectory moving forward for years and years to come. So that's it for today's video, you guys. As mentioned, we've talked about Peak Fintech a few times on the channel. I felt it was my duty to get this video out and really address some of the questions that I've been receiving in relation to the recent share price pullback. If you have any other questions that we didn't cover in the video, feel free to leave them below in the comment section. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, McNallie Money, feel free to do so. And if you're still watching at this point in time, make sure you smash the like button. It really does help get this content to other people like yourself who may find value or may be worrying, wondering what's going on with their investment in Peak. That's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.